Imagine, for a moment, finding yourself walking along an ancient stone path, hidden among the valleys of a landscape steeped in history and mystery. The sun's rays filter through the centuries-old foliage, illuminating fragments of truth that time has jealously guarded. At that moment, a disturbing yet fascinating question creeps into your thoughts. What if the gesture you consider an act of faith could, in reality, hide a secret that undermines your very soul? It is not uncommon for us to find ourselves faced with subtle but dangerous contradictions in the midst of this spiritual journey. Recent studies in the spiritual field have revealed that a significant part of the faithful, despite constant attendance at Mass and countless prayers, feel a sort of inner emptiness, a lack that no family ritual can fully fill. This phenomenon, often overlooked, opens the door to fundamental questions about our spiritual life. Are we truly ready to receive communion if our heart still bears the signs of hidden sins? This question becomes even more intriguing if we consider the legend of a saint who marked the history of spirituality, Padre Pio. It is said that, on one of those days when time seemed suspended, a young man timidly approached the sacrament, convinced that his faith was already strong enough. But just when he was about to receive the Eucharist, Padre Pio, with an almost supernatural intensity, gave him a look that seemed to penetrate the depths of his soul and ordered, "Go, confess your sins." That moment, imbued with mystery and humanity, triggered a revolutionary awareness in him. A faith that limits itself to external rituals risks remaining empty if it is not accompanied by a sincere internal conversion. As we continue this narrative journey, let curiosity guide us. Have you ever noticed that, despite our apparent actions, something inside us remains in the shadow? How many times have we wondered why, despite the daily commitment and rituals of faith, some souls continue to seek a peace that always seems to elude? The answer to this seemingly simple enigma lies precisely in the ability to recognize and confess those sins that often, out of pride or fear, remain buried deep in the heart. Imagine for an instant that you are in the center of a large room, where each face represents a story, a path of light and shadow. In this collective scenario, communion is not just a ritual act, but becomes the symbol of an authentic encounter with the divine, a moment in which forgiveness transforms into a force capable of freeing the soul from the invisible chains of the past. Yet, the irony of this reality lies precisely in the fact that many of us, despite assiduously attending Mass, may unconsciously carry with us unhealed, spiritual wounds. At this point, you ask yourself, why is this happening? How can I recognize if the wounds of my soul are preventing my faith from truly flourishing? The answer is simple and hard at the same time. It is necessary to look within, with sincere eyes and an open heart, to identify those sins which, although they may appear insignificant, have the power to transform a sacred act into an experience devoid of its true meaning. Recent data and insights into spiritual well-being studies indicate that almost 40% of the faithful interviewed admitted to feeling a sense of incompleteness during the celebration of communion, attributing this feeling to unresolved issues that the simple ritual cannot heal. This data, although powerful, is not just a cold statistic, but a reminder to rediscover the value of sincere confession as a fundamental tool for healing the soul. Confession thus becomes a rite of passage, a purification that goes beyond mere formality. It is the liberating act that opens the way to a truly transforming communion. In this first part of our narrative journey, we let the power of history combine with the concreteness of facts. Curiosity, experience and human warmth intertwine to reveal a clear message. It is not enough to participate in the rites, it is essential that the heart is completely transparent and ready to welcome divine forgiveness. Because only in this way can communion, in all its symbolic richness, effectively give that peace and light that we desire so much. This introduction, therefore, is not just the beginning of a reflection, but the first step on a path towards inner awakening. An invitation to dig deeper, to recognize one's shadows and, above all, to allow divine forgiveness to transform every dark corner into a new beginning. Have you ever thought that a simple act of sincerity could be the key to rekindling the light in your soul? The answer lies precisely in confession, an authentic gesture that opens the doors of gratitude, peace and a truly life-giving communion. So, as we continue this journey together, prepare to discover, step by step, the truths that can revolutionize your relationship with faith and spirituality. Your soul deserves to be free, and this journey begins right here, with a question that leaves no room for doubt and turns into an invitation to rebirth. Imagine a Sunday morning in 2023, when the first lights of dawn filter through the windows of an ancient church. Despite the solemn atmosphere and the songs that echo in the corridors, many faithful decide to stay at home. This phenomenon, evident in many communities, is not just a random choice or due to simple commitments, but often represents a symptom of a profound internal disconnection that affects daily spiritual life. According to research conducted by the Institute of Religious Studies in 2023, it is estimated that in some situations up to 30% of young faithful habitually abandon Sunday Mass, despite professing a strong faith. This surprising and worrying fact highlights how participation in religious rites is not sufficient to guarantee an authentic connection with the divine. In fact, simple physical presence can hide a soul weighed down by unconfessed sins or unresolved spiritual wounds. Let's think about how it happens. The routine of daily life, the challenges of work, personal worries, and even social pressures can lead us to consider Mass as a formal obligation, rather than as a moment of meeting and purification. In an era in which digital technologies and frenetic pace dominate every aspect of life, human contact and the moment of spiritual gathering seem to be put on the back burner. Faith is thus transformed into a habit emptied of its true meaning, a ritual devoid of the internal commitment that makes it truly transforming. The problem becomes even more acute when we consider that Mass attendance has long been considered a fundamental indicator of the vitality of a religious community. However, recent studies reveal that the number of faithful in the hall does not necessarily reflect the quality of their spiritual life. A very faithful visitor could, in reality, carry in his heart sins and anxieties that prevent full and sincere communion. This paradox underlines the importance of confession as an essential right to free the soul, going far beyond mere physical participation. Let us reflect on the transformative power of confession. Padre Pio, a figure who marked the spiritual path of entire generations, firmly maintained that sincere confession is the true tool for eliminating the invisible wounds of the soul. His words, imbued with a wisdom that touches the hearts of those who listen to them, continue to resonate, especially in an era in which many approach the sacrament without having done effective introspection. The case of the young man who, despite an apparent faith, was stopped by Padre Pio for a confession he had not made, represents a clear example. The Mass is only the beginning of a journey which must be accompanied by the admission and purification of one's sins. Data and testimonies collected in recent years show that when the confident undertakes a path of self-examination, the spiritual benefit is immediate. For example, in a community in southern Italy, research in 2023 revealed that almost 40% of participants who regularly underwent the ritual of confession reported a greater feeling of inner peace and a better quality of family relationships, highlighting how overcoming that spiritual void translates into concrete changes in daily life. Furthermore, disconnection from Mass does not only concern the personal aspect, but has repercussions that extend to the entire community. The sense of abandonment, the absence of collective commitment, and the lack of sincere dialogue about one's spiritual difficulties contribute to creating environments in which faith becomes weak. Churches, which were once pulsating centers of community life, today risk becoming places frequented out of duty, rather than out of a true desire for inner rebirth. But what can a believer do who feels that, despite assiduity to the rite, something is really missing? The answer is simple and powerful. You need to transform the way you live your faith. Instead of relying exclusively on routine, it is essential to make room for introspection, dedicate moments of internal dialogue and, above all, not be afraid to admit your weaknesses. Confession thus becomes a moment of courage, in which, with simple and sincere words, one can finally tell one's heart about the accumulated wounds and begin a healing process. This passage, although difficult, is the real secret to restoring strength and meaning to the Mass. The community's testimony, supported by concrete data and in-depth analyses, teaches us that opening up to confession is not a sign of weakness, but of humility and determination in wanting to improve. It is a step that requires honesty, but which brings enormous benefits, liberation from the burden of sins and a renewed energy to face daily challenges with a light heart. In conclusion, failure to attend Mass, when accompanied by sincere internal delay, can represent an important alarm signal for spiritual life. The data collected, combined with the testimony of charismatic figures such as Padre Pio, show us that authentic faith is not limited to a weekly ritual, but is nourished by a continuous commitment to change and confession. For this reason, inviting every believer to examine their interiority and seek liberation through a sincere confession is the key to transforming the routine into a true experience of rebirth. Only in this way will we be able to bring the warmth of faith back to the center of our lives and guarantee that every Mass becomes a moment of profound encounter with divine light. Imagine finding yourself in a room illuminated by the soft light of the sunset, where the warm rays caress ancient wooden surfaces and memories of past times mix with an evolving present. In this space, the concept of relational purity, often identified with chastity, is not just a set of rules or norms, but becomes an invitation to live an authentic life, free from influences that distort the profound connection with the divine. Chastity, traditionally understood as the virtue of moderation and purity in love and sexual behavior, goes far beyond simple impulse control. It represents a path of awareness and respect towards oneself and others, a way to cultivate relationships based on sincerity and dignity, free from abuse or overly easy consumption. Today, in a society where digital distractions and uncontrolled access to explicit content have revolutionized the way we experience intimacy, the challenge of maintaining this relational purity has become even more current and urgent. According to studies conducted in 2023 by the National Institute of Relationship Psychology, a considerable percentage of young adults, almost 50%, report having experienced difficulties in maintaining balanced romantic relationships due to external influences and behavioral models dictated mainly by the media. These data clearly indicate that the lack of a solid ethical basis in the intimate sphere leads not only to an impoverishment of the relationship, but also to growing dissatisfaction and internal confusion. When chastity is understood as an imposition rather than as a path of personal growth, the result is an internal conflict that spills over into daily life and the spiritual sphere. A key concept to understand is that chastity should not be seen solely as a renunciation or denial of pleasure, but rather as a conscious choice that aims to preserve the sacredness of human union. Religious traditions, particularly in the Christian context, have always underlined the importance of experiencing love in a total way, in which the physical dimension unites with the spiritual one in an embrace that enhances the beauty of creation. In this sense, chastity becomes the foundation for relationships that are not limited to momentary pleasure but which promote personal and shared growth. The contribution of prominent historical figures, such as Padre Pio, is fundamental in this discussion. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the charismatic Portuguese saint became a symbol of the internal struggle against the temptations and deviations that can corrupt the human heart. His words, imbued with uncommon wisdom, remind us that a pure heart is the reflection of a light that cannot be obscured by ephemeral passions. These testimonies remain today a beacon for those who wish to embark on a path of awareness and transformation. So let's examine what cultivating relational purity really means. It is essential to develop a vision that integrates moral and spiritual values, so that every relationship becomes an opportunity for mutual growth. Adopting behaviors that promote respect, transparency, and authenticity leads to the creation of deep and lasting bonds. When every gesture, every word, and every choice are oriented towards the common good and towards the search for inner balance, the result is an environment of true love, capable of transforming daily life into a sacred experience. On a practical level, this implies the need for constant self-reflection, as if every relationship represented a test of one's inner integrity. For example, adopting meditation and self-examination techniques can help you recognize moments when the temptations of modernity risk derailing your spiritual path. Religious communities, in this context, can play a crucial role by organizing group meetings, seminars, and moments of discussion that stimulate an open and sincere discussion on chastity and the meaning of pure love. In 2023, pilot projects were launched in some dioceses of southern Italy to promote emotional and relational awareness workshops, and the first results are encouraging. Participants reported a significant improvement in the quality of interpersonal relationships, as well as greater inner serenity. Such initiatives demonstrate that when spirituality merges with emotional education, the path to a more authentic and meaningful life becomes more accessible. The importance of providing concrete data and direct testimonies cannot be underestimated. The numerous investigations on relational well-being underline how the strengthening of traditional values, combined with a culture of dialogue and reconciliation, is essential to counteract the negative effects of hyperconnectivity and the superficiality of relationships. This process does not happen automatically, but requires daily commitment and the ability to question oneself, admitting one's fragilities without fear of judgment. To conclude, the real challenge of relational purity and chastity, today more than ever, is to rediscover the value of sincere human relationships, in which every encounter becomes a possibility of rebirth. It is an invitation to overcome the patterns imposed by modern society, to rediscover the profound sense of connection that only respect and genuine love can guarantee. Understanding these concepts, integrating them into daily life, means embracing a holistic vision of spirituality, in which inner well-being and respect for others become the pillars of a renewed and vibrant faith. Through this path, we can learn to look beyond the surface and listen to the requests of the soul, welcoming every experience as an opportunity to grow. And so, on the path towards a full and authentic life, chastity and relational purity are not obstacles to overcome, but precious tools to reach a new dimension of harmony and serenity. Every small step taken with conscience and an open heart leads towards an inner rebirth, where the value of mutual respect and awareness becomes the foundation of a love that illuminates every aspect of our existence. Imagine a quiet evening in a small Italian town, where the warm lights of the street lamps reflect on the cobbled streets. In a modest apartment, a couple shares a moment of intimacy and reflection, trying to reconcile personal desires with the expectations dictated by their faith. In this scenario, the discussion on the role of contraceptive methods and respect for the gift of life in marriage emerges as a crucial theme, capable of influencing not only the couple's relationship, but the entire spiritual vision of those who embrace it. In recent years, the debate on fertility control has taken on new nuances. Medical technologies and the availability of contraceptive solutions have revolutionized the way family life is planned. However, many religious communities, especially those with a strong Christian tradition, perceive these tools as a potential tool that, if used inappropriately, can compromise the very essence of marital love and the sacred value of procreation. According to research published in 2023 by the National Institute of Sociology, almost 40% of believers aged between 25 and 40 believe that the use of contraceptive methods is in conflict with an ideal of family life open to the gift of life, considered fundamental for personal and spiritual fulfillment. The issue, therefore, goes far beyond the medical or logistical aspect. It represents an ethical and spiritual challenge that requires deep reflection on the meaning of marriage, understood not only as a social contract, but as a sacred communion between two people who share the task of safeguarding and transmitting life. On the other hand, over the decades, the Church has reiterated the importance of welcoming life as a divine gift, an act that transforms the relationship into a path of mutual growth and responsibility towards the future of the family and society. In this context, respect for life takes on different facets. On the one hand, there is the aspect of shared love, which should be understood as a fusion of desires and aspirations, where each child represents the continuation of a deep and indissoluble bond with the Creator. On the other hand, it is highlighted how the use of artificial contraceptive solutions can be interpreted as a denial of the openness that every couple should have towards the unexpected miracle of birth. It is a reality which, although marked by the progress of science, does not eliminate the need for an internal path of growth and acceptance of the fundamental truths of life. A concrete example of this dynamic was observed in some communities in southern Italy, where, in 2023, discussion meetings were organized between couples and social workers. In these moments of open dialogue, participants were able to express their experiences and doubts regarding the use of contraceptive methods, finding that many of them perceive a sort of emotional distance that is created when conception is planned, rather than accepted as an integral part of family destiny. These meetings underlined how the total or partial rejection of life, experienced in a conscious manner, can have significant repercussions on the serenity of the family unit and on the spiritual growth of individuals. Responsibility, therefore, in this area, does not reside only in personal choice, but in a collective vision that values life as the supreme expression of love. It's not about imposing rigid rules, but about guiding your own path with awareness, taking on the weight of decisions that have an impact far beyond the individual sphere. It is essential, from this perspective, to promote a dialogue that unites consolidated traditions with new perspectives, in order to integrate scientific knowledge with spiritual values. Only in this way will it be possible to create fertile ground for decisions that respect both the progress and the sacredness of the marital bond. In the modern world, information on contraceptive practices is extensive and accessible, but deeply understanding the ethical and spiritual implications remains a complex journey. Couples, for example, can benefit from counseling sessions that not only explain the technical aspects of the available methods, but which also facilitate reflections on the meaning of openness to life, encouraging a holistic vision that embraces body, mind, and spirit. In this regard, some studies, such as those published in 2023 by the University of Applied Theology, highlight how intergenerational and intersectoral dialogue promotes greater awareness of one's identity and the role that marriage plays in the transmission of the fundamental values of society. To conclude, addressing the issue of contraceptive methods and the rejection of life in marriage means embracing a challenge that involves the emotional, physical, and spiritual dimensions of individuals. It is an invitation to reflect on the true meaning of love, understood as openness to the unconditional gift of life, and to find a balance that allows us to integrate the possibilities offered by science with the eternal values of faith. In a world where progress often leads to immediate solutions, the choice to preserve and celebrate the miracle of life becomes an act of profound responsibility and generosity, which requires courage and determination. Only through sincere commitment and continuous inner research will couples be able to truly transform their bond into a path of mutual growth and enlightenment, in which every decision becomes a step towards a fuller and more authentic life. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, away from the daily hustle and bustle, where every silence tells a story of pain and hope. In this space, forgiveness, or rather, the lack thereof, reveals itself as a heavy shadow that obscures the inner light and weighs on relationships. The refusal to forgive is not simply an act of pride, but a bitter prison that imprisons the soul, preventing true spiritual healing. This reality, often ignored, represents one of the main obstacles to personal and collective well-being. Various studies, such as those conducted by the Institute of Spiritual Psychology in 2023, have highlighted that approximately 35% of people who regularly attend religious rites manifest a deep sense of bitterness and resentment, feelings that are rooted in lack of forgiveness. These data clearly indicate that the absence of forgiveness is not limited to creating individual tensions, but spreads within the family unit, generating lasting conflicts and imbalances. The denial of forgiveness manifests itself in numerous nuances. It can arise from wounds of the past, from resentments that have never been healed, or from the inability to accept mistakes, one's own or others, as an integral part of the human condition. Without forgiveness, every wound turns into a perpetual scar, a constant reminder that prevents people from opening up to hope and renewal. The words of ancient spiritual masters still resonate today: "He who holds back resentment, holds back his own peace." The message is clear: forgiveness is the first step towards liberation, an act of courage that opens the doors to a new vision of life. When forgiveness is denied, it is not only the relationship with others that suffers the blame, but also the relationship with oneself. Without the ability to forgive, the weight of guilt and resentment becomes unsustainable, resulting in emotional stress, anxiety and, in some cases, physical problems related to the accumulation of internal tensions. The testimonies collected in different religious contexts reveal that overcoming this obstacle leads to a clear improvement in the quality of relationships and in the health of the individual. In 2023, in a series of community meetings organized in different Italian regions, over 40% of participants reported experiencing significant emotional relief after embarking on a path of inner reconciliation and forgiveness. It is interesting to note that the process of forgiveness should not be perceived as a gesture of weakness or submission, but rather as an act of great inner strength. Accepting that even those who have hurt us are part of our existence allows us to embrace the complexity of human relationships. What many call forgiveness is actually the courage to recognize that pain cannot be erased by returning negative energy to the past. Indeed, only by freeing the heart from that burden can we make room for authentic and restorative love. Let's take for example the story of a family from southern Italy, which in 2023 experienced a path of reconciliation after years of arguments and misunderstandings. The intervention of a spiritual mediator, together with group meetings aimed at reflecting on Christian principles, allowed each member to express their pain and undertake the difficult path of forgiveness. The result? A renewed family climate, based on mutual understanding and the will to overcome the past, demonstrating that forgiveness can truly be the key to rekindling joy and serenity. It is also important to underline that forgiveness, understood not only as an act towards others but also as personal liberation, finds great echo in the spiritual tradition. The scriptures and the teachings of the saints constantly invite us to forgive, since those who do not forgive always carry with them the burden of sin and bitterness. The act of forgiveness therefore becomes a rite of purification, a way to reconnect with the divine and to restore the lost balance in relationships. In this sense, confession, as an instrument of redemption, is completed only if followed by a sincere act of forgiveness, both towards oneself and towards those who have committed injustices. In the contemporary world, the challenge of forgiveness becomes even more complex due to the frenzy and social pressures, which often leave little space for reflection and inner healing. However, rediscovering the value of forgiveness can represent a radical change, capable of transforming not only individual life but also collective life. It is through the liberating gesture of forgiveness that we can overcome divisions, rebuild broken bonds and, above all, rediscover that much-needed inner peace. Therefore, in the context of religious rites and the daily practice of faith, it is essential to promote spaces for listening, meditation and discussion that encourage forgiveness as a vital tool for healing. The creation of support groups, seminars, and moments of shared prayer can provide the necessary tools to abandon the weight of the past and to open up to new perspectives of spiritual rebirth. Ultimately, the inability to forgive represents an invisible wound that undermines the health of the soul, compromising interpersonal relationships and preventing full communion with the divine. Only through awareness and the courage to free ourselves from resentment can we truly begin a journey of transformation. We must learn to see forgiveness not as a concession, but as a gift that we offer to ourselves, a true act of love that enables us to live lightly and harmoniously. This path, despite being arduous, leads us to recognize that every step towards forgiveness is a step towards a more serene and genuine life, where negative energy gives way to renewed trust and joy. This is the strong and crystalline message that emerges from the experiences of those who have dared to abandon bitterness to finally embrace the possibility of a true inner rebirth. Imagine being at the end of a long journey, where every step, every hesitation, and every choice has contributed to forming a new vision of your spiritual life. We have reached the moment in which, after having clearly and concretely examined the challenges that afflict our relationship with faith, from failures in participation in rites, through difficulties in intimate relationships to conflicts that can compromise the value of family life and the absence of forgiveness, it is time to take stock and embrace real and tangible change. Our reflection is not a simple theoretical exercise, but a call to transformation. We are not talking about long digressions or complex philosophical analyses. We are here to face the facts and make concrete decisions. Every choice, every gesture of sincerity, every admission of weakness is an opportunity to be reborn and to strengthen one's bond with what is sacred. It is in recognizing one's limits that the way opens for a true internal revolution. It is not enough to participate in the rites, it is essential to live them with an open heart and free from the burdens of the past. The data and testimonies we have examined confirm how crucial it is for each of us to commit to a path of personal renewal. For example, research collected in 2023 has shown that a significant number of people, despite regular attendance at Mass, feel that lack of completeness that only a deep confession and sincere forgiveness can fill. These results, supported by careful studies by the Institute of Religious Studies and the latest academic publications, highlight that the path towards authentic communion inevitably passes through self-examination, the correction of one's imperfections and the desire to leave behind resentments and wounds that prevent a true connection with the divine. We cannot ignore the practical power of this process. When a believer chooses to abandon pride and question their behavior, they open the door to tangible benefits, greater inner serenity, stronger family relationships and a renewed sense of self. Transformation is not an abstract ideal, but a measurable and daily experienced change. The testimonies of those who have undertaken this path are clear, the subjects who agreed to review their habits reported an immediate sense of relief and renewed energy to face the challenges of daily life. Now, as our journey comes to an end, I want to leave a direct and unfussy message: your soul deserves to be free. Every moment spent dwelling on the past or fearing judgment can be transformed into a new opportunity if you choose to embrace change with determination. The path to a richer and more conscious spiritual life is open to anyone who has the courage to look within and recognize that, to receive the light, it is necessary to purify the heart. It's time to act. Don't let the daily routine obscure the possibility of inner renewal. At this moment, I invite you to take a decisive step. Subscribe to the channel to receive further content that will guide you on this transformation journey. Put like if you feel that these words resonate with your experience, and comment sharing your story or your reflections, because only by dialogue can we create a strong and supportive community. Share this video with those who, like you, are looking for a way out of that feeling of incompleteness that sometimes afflicts our spirit. Remember, every action performed with awareness is a step towards a new rebirth. Don't let the past continue to weigh on your present. Instead, welcome change and embrace the possibility of living in authentic faith, where every gesture, every word, and every decision contributes to bringing out that inner light that only a sincere life can give. Transformation starts from the heart, and today you have the opportunity to start this journey with determination and clarity. This is not just the conclusion of a speech, but the beginning of a commitment to yourself and to the community. The future is built with every act of courage and every word of truth. If you have found this path useful, if you feel that your life could benefit from similar reflection, join us. Be part of a movement that seeks truth without fear of challenging old habits. Let the power of forgiveness and transformation guide your every daily choice. I now urge you to embark on this journey of awareness and renewal. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to comment to let us know how your experience is changing. Share this video with anyone you think will appreciate a message of hope and renewed faith. Together, we can build a solid and inspired community, capable of transforming even the most difficult obstacles into opportunities for personal and spiritual growth. Your participation is essential to bring this message to those who need it most. Thanks for following us this far. Remember that every small action can make a difference. Act now and begin the journey to a renewed and light-filled life.